This is Emergency FD Storyline.
But I think my biggest takeaway from my entire career is leaving a legacy, trying each day to push people to be better tomorrow than they were today, to leave a legacy with everybody that I've come in contact with. I think that's what drives me the most.
Some of the greatest moments in my life are spent getting to know exceptional individuals, people who work hard, take every step in life with a passion, and rise to lead and mentor others. It has been my pleasure to know a man who fits that description. He carries on the family business as a firefighter because his dad was a legend in Memphis. Now his sons carry on that business. This firefighter is a mentor to many and has worn many fire hats in his career in the fire service and has gone from rookie to a true leader. The views expressed on this program are from the guests and the host and do not necessarily represent the views of any government agency, private company, or public service. Emergency FD Storyline's focus is to tell the stories of those in the fire service and to highlight what matters to our first responders. I first began my passion of telling stories of those in the fire service as a young man. A big portion of my experience came from riding with, living with, and working with the men and women of the Memphis Fire Department. There was a particular group of young men and women who began work in the late 1980s and early 1990s, who experienced the birth of a new era in firefighting. From that group, many new and effective leaders were born who serve our communities today. And it has been my honor to know so many of them through the years. In fact, many of those have been on previous podcasts. One of those individuals was a skinny kid who would have you laughing almost as soon as you met him. His name is Ronnie Beasley, and most of us refer to him as Bease. Some of my favorite memories are of being around Bease and his band of brothers on a rig known as Rescue 1 in Memphis, or watching him develop new safety techniques for the fire department as a young lieutenant in the Fire Training Center in Memphis. You see, even as a rookie, Bease had a burning passion for the art of the fire service. Despite his contagious smile and laugh, which he maintains today, he took his job very seriously. And I witnessed the growth of the young Ron Beasley into a leader of leaders. Chief Ronnie Beasley is on his second fire career as the chief for the Laverne Fire Rescue in Laverne, Tennessee, just a little bit south of Nashville, Tennessee. Leaving a legacy from rookie to leader. That's our storyline. You know, there are individuals that I've known through the years that I've watched rise through the ranks of the fire service, from private, lieutenant, battalion chief, division chief, up in the command staff, and to the point of being a chief of training of a major fire department, and now on a second career as a chief at another fire department. And with me is my good friend, Ronnie Beasley. Some call you Thomas, right?
That's my official given name.
That's a good name.
Oh, absolutely. In Memphis, it was Thomas Beasley on all my business cards and email. I like it here where I'm Ronnie.
Yeah,
so.
Everybody knows you're those Ronnie.
Yeah.
I remember when you were just a pup in the fire service, you always had that smile. It always looked like Eddie Haskell. You were up to something. That's the thing I remember. I think we're going to save that for another podcast because you had some of the guys you were with and had more fun.
Yeah.
You are a second-generation firefighter. Your dad, right?
Absolutely. And Tom, if I could, I'd just start by thanking you for having me on here.
Oh, sure. Long time. Been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of upset that you allowed your son to get in before me.
That's true.
But
you got him in where he is.
But, you know, I've listened to your podcasts. I think I probably listened to all of them. You know, you had Director Charlie Smith, who hired me, that I consider a friend and a mentor. Obviously, you've had Director Sweat now, Gina Sweat, the fire chief.
In Memphis, yeah.
Fire chief in Memphis. And, you know, she and I were study buddies in fire school and worked together for years. Jim Cunningham, but, you know, legend.
Oh, man.
That's who firefighters want to be when they grow up, without question. So thank you for having me on, Tom. And, you know, most people won't know, and you may not even remember, but we've known each other since 99 when I went to training, but there for a brief period of time, you were my adult Sunday school teacher at Faith Baptist Church.
Yeah. I was your adult Sunday school teacher.
I'm not sure it was an adult that you were teaching, but there you go.
The first time I saw you was at a 5-alarm fire at a Walmart.
Yeah, riding Engine 19, rookie on Engine 19.
When did you start? I guess because of your dad?
Yeah.
Were you bit by the fire bug? Tell me about your father.
Dad retired 25 years to the date with the Memphis Fire Department. He retired as a lieutenant, all extremely busy fire companies. Rode Engine 8 for a long period of time, Engine 19, Engine 28. Always worked in those communities that was a heavy fire volume. Very well respected Steve Rainey and Larry Anthony and those guys. Charlie Smith speaks highly of him, and Dick Arwood. Really enjoyed what he did. Charlie Smith told me, he said, you could always tell when firefighters the reason they were good at things, because he said he was always smiling when he came out the door. So he was very well respected. It set up an extremely high bar for me. And probably through most of my career, it was a nagging piece of what I had to accomplish, that I had to be better than. I had no point of failure. There was I could not fail. So I had a standard to live up to without question.
You had that passion. I could tell you had that focus. And when you got on the scene, it was all business. He had that big influence on you. I can tell that. Besides that, you have 2 sons now in the fire service.
My oldest, Clay, he is probably year and a half, pushing towards 2 years with Sevierville Fire Department. He's doing extremely well up there, making real good progress, learning a lot, and I believe he's contributing to the department as well. And then my youngest just graduated fire school in Murfreesboro, Jacob. So he works here in the city of Murfreesboro. Everything that I've heard so far about him is he's doing extremely well. He's much different personality than the older one. He's much more quiet, works hard. We try to teach all our kids to be adults. You'll show up for work on time, and that means no later than 30 minutes early.
Wow.
Look your boss in the face and shake their hand and do a good job. You will succeed in this world.
And your daughter also, she has that passion. She's also headed in that direction and working to get that right now. What's she doing?
She's working towards and has interest in emergency services, and not necessarily being a firefighter, police officer, EMT, or paramedic, but I think she's looking at the administrative piece of it, working in emergency management, somewhere in an office of the sheriff's office, fire chief's office, or something of those natures, wanting to be an administrative person. And she has that passion to serve. She sees that there is something different than just going to work. Going to the office should not be going to work.
Yeah, your sons look a lot like you. When I see them in pictures when you were younger, I'm like, oh my gosh, spitting images. I'm glad your daughter is more like your wife. She's she's really
definitely just doing well on that side. And you can look at my granddad, my dad. There's no question. My sons, we all look alike.
It's amazing. You just know that's a Beasley, and
absolutely.
That's another side of you too. That family name Beasley.
Yeah.
One of the few kilt-wearing firefighters I know, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You started out, I guess, academy in Memphis. You had an interesting class. When you began, you had no idea these individuals would be doing what they're doing. Tell me a little bit about some of the people in that class.
I'll tell you, that's an outstanding group of individuals in that class without question. I believe there were 69 of us at the time. We graduated with one less. In that graduating class, you have, obviously, Gina, the fire chief in Memphis, Jim Harville. Jim Harville is the fire chief in Arlington, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Rich Hartfield is the fire chief in Fayette County. And then myself, just in our group, we had had class divided in half. The front half of the class, alphabetically, you have 4 fire chiefs. If you look at the whole class as a whole, battalion chiefs, division chiefs, lieutenants, leaders from top to bottom, without question. There's definitely a strong impact from that. And a lot of that comes from what we got from Charlie Smith. He set the tone as we were rookies. He was coming in probably in his second year as the fire chief. And his leadership at that point, how he took charge of that fire department and set the pace of what the fire service in the nation looks like, what we should look like, and how we get to the point of where we are today. I think a huge piece of that comes from that 92, 97, 99 era of leadership, without question.
And you guys were the recipients of that. That was a dramatic period. We'll talk about that too, how that happened. I guess your first engine house, what was that like the first time you got on the job after going through all that training? I know.
Well, I was on Engine 19, which was also the company my dad was on as a rookie.
Oh, wow.
And that was no accident. Interestingly enough, my lieutenant drove for my dad at one point. And so, I mean, the very first morning, I'm checking the pumper, and I see Lieutenant Spencer walking in the back door of the building, and he looks at me and goes, "Oh, God." I mean, he hadn't seen me since I was a little kid. And I mean, he took one look at me, so well, here we go. It's another one just like him. When I was at Engine 19, most people don't know that many fire stations in Memphis, somebody came by and on Sunday mornings and had some devotional and like a Sunday school class, and the Sunday school teacher came by. He sat down and looked at me and goes, "Are you a Beasley?" And he had been there doing the same thing since my dad was on Engine 19 in 1970.
Oh, my goodness.
So I started at Engine 19. Lieutenant Spencer was a huge mentor for me, set me in the right direction, made sure that right away, getting everything that I needed for the department, but also saying, hey, these are the things that you're going to have to do to be successful. And I really believe that, number one, I think the lieutenant's rank is probably one of the most important, if not the most important position in a fire department. They set the tone, they set the pace every single day. They do things that I'm unaware of as the fire chief. And he's a great example of that. I was enrolled in college classes right away, pursuing an education because he was, and he found that interesting and was pushing us in the same direction.
So you were going to college at the same time then, right after you got out?
After I got off my probationary period, I started taking the hazardous material classes that were taught at State Tech at the time by Jim Covington.
Another kind of legend in training. Yeah.
He's a legend everywhere, man.
He's the only man who could sit and smoke for I don't know how long and turn colors, and he was still fine.
Yep, just fine. But so, yeah, I started there, and right after that, I started taking fire science courses. Skeeter Rutledge was teaching, Dick Arwood was teaching, and it was a big part of my career, and I think it set the tone, and we're trying to mirror some of the same things in the department that we're working through today.
I think shortly after you came on, I had just started doing what I was doing with Memphis. And the first thing that I remember was fire called Pilgrim's Hope. It was a church. That was one of your first exposures to, I'd call the reality of the job. And up until that time, I didn't know firefighters died in the line of duty. And what was that like for you? And what happened? Maybe you can describe a little bit about it.
I guess we had came out of fire school September, October of 92.
Yeah.
That was the day after Christmas, 1992. We were on the verge of changing to full bunker gear. At that time, we were still wearing hip boots, and we were allowed to wear hip boots. I had probably 6 or 8 months wearing the 3/4 hip boots. And
I remember that.
the change of that, again, is a lot of Charlie Smith leadership. ICS was being taught and then having to be enforced. That was difficult. You can teach everything you want to, but he was having a hard time with the enforcement issue at that time. He was still with that change management product that we all know about. So we're going through that growing process in the department. And we can talk briefly later about the difference between that fire and fire 10 or 11 years afterwards and how that changed. But, we received the call. Engine 27 was out of the house on an automobile fire, so we were the next due pumper in behind them. They should have been first due. So we would have been the third pumper. Engine 27 lieutenant saw that, saw the smoke, wrapped up his auto fire, got in service. So they disregarded us, but sent us on to Engine 27 to cover. Knowing what they were hearing on the radio, there was probably a significant fire, and we pushed to a multiple alarm fire. And we're pulling on the apron. The battalion chief either called for additional companies or called for the second alarm. We were dispatched at that point. I remember arriving on the scene, and the battalion chief at the time literally was running towards us. We were the first company to arrive on the scene of the second alarm assignment. And he grabbed my lieutenant by the coat and says, "Come on, I've got 2 firefighters trapped in the building." And then he took off. So me being a rookie, my first instinct is, well, I got to do what the chief says. So he's running. That means I need to run. And Lieutenant Spencer grabbed me by the neck and says, "We don't run. We move very fast, but we don't run."
Yeah.
Didn't really understand that, but we worked hard throughout the incident. We tried to make the initial rescue on what would be the Delta Division. Moved around to the Bravo Division through the back of the building, went around the other side, then came back around. And about that time, they had found J.D. Hill. And we stepped inside the little bitty slat windows and helped bring him out of the building. I was not involved in the rescue, just bringing him from the building, setting him down. And I can remember seeing him standing there as they were taking what was left of his turnout gear away from him and talking to him. And just looking at that at the time, maybe I get shocked. I don't know. It didn't seem to bother me looking at it at that point.
He was burned.
He was, yeah. Without question. They stick him in an ambulance, and don't know who it was. Maybe the chief says, "Hey, I need you to drive to the hospital." And I looked at my lieutenant and I said, "I don't know how to get to the hospital." So they put somebody
hospital,
else
what's that?
Yeah. I mean, I was scared to death that no, I don't want that responsibility. But, looking back on it, definitely had an impact on my career, without question. Just understanding what the factors that led to that, why that situation occurred, what could have been done to prevent it. I guess at that point I realized that this is something that you can get hurt or killed at. September, October, November, December, I had probably worked 2, maybe 3 house fires. I know an apartment fire, multiple mattress fires. It seemed like we made mattress fires once every 3 work days. And I thought I was a devil dog firefighter at this point, man. I had 6 fires under my belt and this occurs. Definitely a reality check. But as a 22-year-old, did I truly grasp that yet or not? I'm not sure. And probably a very immature 22-year-old.
That was tough because 2 firefighters lost their lives.
Yeah, Joseph Boswell and J.D. Hill.
Shortly after that, you were talking about Charlie Smith, and we mentioned him quite a bit. Part of the reason is that he is a legend when it comes to a lot of the transitions. People really sometimes don't give him credit, but that was an uphill climb. Shortly after that, I remember Charlie told me that they had new turnouts. I guess there was like a week or 2 delay getting them out to the engine companies.
Yeah.
And he always regretted. He said something about that if they had probably in there, these guys might have had a better chance because they had were they in hip boots? I think both of them. And
both of them were in hip boots and long coats. Maybe the protective gear would have been better than what we were wearing, obviously. Yeah. But what was left of the gear was very minimal.
That was a very difficult situation, regardless.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything at that time was much different. I mean, there had been a policy for years about wearing an SCBA.
I mean, that was something I guess was drilled into you to wear them then? Or, okay, you weren't. I thought maybe your group, they were emphasizing it then.
No, we were definitely emphasized. And just, again, my lieutenant worked for my dad. And,
yeah.
That was a growing piece. I mean, I wasn't opposed to wearing it, and I wore it when it was just absolutely necessary. But, at that time in our career, it was against the rules, without question. But, if you could cut it, they didn't say much.
You can go in without it. You can tough it out. You're a good firefighter.
I mean, you're carrying the weight around, and we wouldn't even put it on our face piece. On our face, it make no sense.
And steel canisters, too, in the back. That wasn't
at that time, they were still MSA steel bottles with a big inhalation tube on the front.
I remember Memphis got these new turnouts, which I thought were just revolutionary at the time, which I think with the old Morning Pride had full pants, better materials for sure.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Much lighter. I mean, even with the full gear, was lighter than what we were wearing as a coat before. Much more protective. Somewhat wicking away sweat moisture better than what we were wearing, because what we had was a canvas coat, green liner on the inside, but it had a rubber backing on that backside of that green liner. It did not do anything. It was not Gore-Tex. It was not any of the new materials that we have today for sure. But it was a much lighter product. And, and then we quickly go to that. New SCBAs. I mean, I was on the Engine 19, and I mean, as a rookie, I was part of the test team or test group that tested all multiple SCBAs, and we ended up with the Drager pack. And so, that was a change.
When you started, this is like you are going through a transition and fire tactics, technology, done everything you're wearing, hoods. Hey, there's a surprise. Even past devices, which those things were just coming in.
Yeah. So my lieutenant tells the top firefighter on our fire company, probably had 24, 25 years and was as tough as a nickel steak. I mean, he was a firefighter to the core. They're issuing this Nomex hood, and he would put it on, and my lieutenant, I'm sitting there, greenhorn rookie, says, "You're going to have to teach Brad how to put that Nomex hood." How do I teach that guy anything? So I had to find a way to say, "Hey, look, see, this is what I'm doing," because he would put his mask on and put the hood on top of it and have a little bitty hole to look out over on the side.
And no wonder he didn't want to wear it.
Yeah. He said he felt like he was wearing somebody's panties on his head. That's exactly what he said. So it was a lot of change, and it was all for the good, without question. I mean, and again, Charlie Smith was a pioneer in our region for sure.
Yeah,
he was a shrewd businessman. I mean, that's how we were able to get the products that we did at the prices that we did with the contracts that we did at the time. Of course, I didn't understand that. I was a rookie and didn't know anything, but now I see what he did.
And even apparatus changed too during that time.
Absolutely. He was a bulldog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An alpha male. He's a bulldog, and it's going to be his way, no other way. And that's what was needed at the time. And, of course, he had Dick Arwood as the chief of training. And so he's coming up with great ideas and teaching and policies into place. And then you had Charlie Smith enforcing it with an iron fist. And in reality, that's what had to happen.
I just remember you were young and you got out there at the training academy. That was pretty quick.
That's how I was promoted. Engine 19, spent a couple of years on Engine 31, probably the largest transfer that happened in the city of Memphis history, fire department history. They transferred every single EMT all over the city, and I ended up on Engine 31 in North Memphis.
You were one of those kind of early EMTs coming out.
We were in a second class, and so they transferred all of us to specific companies that would make medical calls.
And that was before they had first responders. They didn't even really have them in an organized way in the city at the time. And all of a sudden they became kind of like a first responding pumper, a pumper, or was it the engines at the time?
Yeah, they were the pumpers, with the medical crews. There were a few truck companies that were medical, depending where they're at in the city. It's hard for me to try to remember what they were doing prior to me getting there. Yeah. But it was definitely, our medical kit was in a wooden box or a tackle box. Yeah. So there wasn't a whole lot there. When our group started hitting fire stations and being the second class, maybe at that point we might have had 150 EMTs on the department that were not in the ambulance world. Now I ended up working for Michael Jubert for a brief period of time. He retired as the deputy director of the fire department. Super guy. I learned a lot from him. Looking back on things, there was no rumors coming out of his mouth. He did not participate in any of that. Yeah. He would listen. If you were talking to him, he had a sole focus of listening to you. Looking back on that, I understand that now. I didn't understand it at the time. And then I worked for Fred Stewart, battalion chief. He was the battalion chief at the Family Dollar Store fire, the initial incident commander. He made sure that we were more than competent in our skills. It was a constant quiz with him. He never walked in the fire station. He was not grilling us about something. He would have in his pockets street names and split numbers, and he was asking, how do you get here? How do you get? It was a constant mentoring and growing for us. And he was the right person for that. Everything falls in line into place, and he was pushing me. He was trying to be upwardly mobile within the department, and he was pushing us to be the same. And he's the sole reason that Mike and I landed on Rescue 1, Special Operations and Service in 1997. He made that happen for us. 3 years as a firefighter on Rescue 1 and Engine 13 in a Special Operations house. Got promoted 99 lieutenant, was sent to training.
I remember when you were out at the training academy.
That's 94, 95.
First time I ever saw it, you were working on something called the Memphis drill.
Yeah. At that time was the first mention in anybody's policies about a rapid intervention team. That was a new concept. A lot of times the rescue would arrive on the scene and the battalion chief would make us rapid intervention. Became really interested in how to perform rescues more efficiently and how to make the rescue. While I was there, I was fortunate enough to go to some trainers, Kentucky and in Indianapolis at the FDIC on firefighter survival and rapid intervention. And so I bring those back, and I had no idea that the entanglement drill was called the Memphis drill. I didn't invent any of those. I went to classes and attended, but it was the beginnings of that in the nation. We bring it home. We had a building donated to us to use in North Memphis. It took us 8 months to get the entire fire department through. We ended up training some of the outlying cities, maybe Germantown and Collierville as well, probably 2,000 plus firefighters. Guys came out there grumbling and groveling and angry about being there, especially we were a very senior fire department at the time. It had been years since they've done any hands-on training, and they come out there, and we went from cold to hot, back to cold to get it completed. They didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And then when some crotchety old senior firefighter pats you on the back, says, best class has been to in 25 years on the Memphis Fire Department. We should have done this years before. That's when you're making impact.
That's a compliment. That tells you something.
I'm still teaching the same things. Our guys teach it. I support it. I give my piece of it. Between the Pilgrim's Hope Fire and Family Dollar Store Fire, after I had some time on the job, I have some valid speaking points, how those things could have been prevented. Now that they're not preventable, what do we do to fix it if that occurred? That was definitely a passion. That survival and risk, studied, taught it for 2.5, 3 years as a lieutenant at training. And even when I got back to the fire company, went back to the special operations house, it was not uncommon for us to go to the training center at 10 or 11 o'clock. We have been to the training center at 1 in the morning, to the point when you call dispatch and say, show us on the air going to training. And they say, well, yeah, whatever. Look out the door and 20 minutes and we'll be there. Man, what a special group of people that those guys were in that house.
Like New York, I had been riding in New York and I saw Rescue 1, Rescue 2, Rescue 3. Yeah. All of a sudden, Memphis had this Rescue 1. It was this unit, kind of looked like one of theirs. One of the first times I was riding on that thing, and there you were. You guys were on that Rescue 1. You were part of that initial group that went in there The new guys.
That was another Charlie Smith project. You had to have very specific requirements. I mean, you had to have 5+ years on the job, had to have recommendations from battalion chiefs and division chiefs. You had to have some amount of either hazmat or rope or a combination of something just to have an opportunity to be there at the time. The rescue company basically was the combination of the hazmat team, Squad 6, that was at Fire Station 13, the rope rescue team, it was at Engine House 7, was Snorkel 13 and Engine 7, put into one place. Took structural collapse because we were building the FEMA USAR team. Great to be on the front end of that, and it mirrored the USAR program. Charlie Smith told us that at the time, you're going to go through one air bottle, and I want you to go back and put another one on your back, and you go back and finish putting fire out where everybody else is taking a break. And that's what he requested of us at the time. I mean, we had the nicknames of Spice Boys.
I've heard that from my son. They call them that. I remember you were called the Spice Boys. One of the reasons I remember you guys would show up. Everyone else was running with these Light Force helmets back in the day. All of a sudden, you guys showed up with these traditional kind of leather-looking helmets and looked like New York, and you'd show up.
Yeah.
Air bottles. You had those air bottles. They weren't the 2216.
We had 45-minute bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 45-minute bottles when everybody else was 30. So we felt pretty fortunate to be there. Without question.
That's how the Spice Boy thing started. I could hear that, like, oh, here they come. They're not gonna do any overhaul. They're gonna take off and leave.
Yeah, we help put your fire out, and then we swap out our bottles and go home. Yeah. What a gig, man!
It was a good gig. You're listening to Emergency FD Storyline with my guest, Chief Ronnie Beasley from Laverne Fire Rescue in Laverne, Tennessee. I'm Tom Mann, and I want to take a moment to remind you that you can help continue the production of Emergency FD Storyline, the audio podcast, by donating any amount at our website, emergencyfd.com, or on emergencyfdstoryline.com. Look for that donate page on our website, and any amount will make a difference. Also, remember to please like, share, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and please feel free to share the podcast with others. Let's return to our storyline, Leaving a Legacy from Rookie to Leader, with Chief Ronnie Beasley. Again, the USAR, that had started, that was Charlie Smith again, the Urban Search and Rescue Team. That was revolutionary at the time, and that also brought skills within the Memphis Fire Department. And again, you were part of the recipient of that at that time.
It affected not only Memphis Fire Department, because we were getting training that we didn't have. The first thing you do is structural collapse.
Yeah.
How to shore up a building that has collapsed some capacity. Breaching and breaking. How do you access those areas? Rope class. All that was combined into one program. You had not just Memphis Fire, but Bartlett, Germantown, Arlington, Collierville, and the county all had people as part of the FEMA USAR team throughout the years. And that USAR program has propped up a lot of special operations program in that region without question that may not have been capable without it. Whatever we took from FEMA USAR, we brought back to the department, even just the levels of experience. Hurricane Harvey, hundreds of people we rescued. It was into the thousands by boat. How many years would that take to duplicate in one city? It's impossible. FEMA USAR has been a huge part of my career, my risk-benefit analysis, all the things that go through my head.
How many years have you been involved in USAR?
Before we were even a recognized team in 94, 95, I started working and trying to help build the program, count carabiners till 2022, 2021.
Wow. You're involved in Katrina, all those incidences that go through the years. I can remember seeing posts you would put up on social media and you were headed out going somewhere.
You know, again, the USAR was phenomenal. Traveling all over the United States. I mean, literally Moore, Oklahoma, went to Salt Lake City during the Olympics to stand by for a terrorist threat.
9/11, you guys are at the Pentagon, right?
I was at the Grand Canyon, so I missed that. But those guys went to the Pentagon. We had just finished teaching a structural collapse class. I mean, literally within weeks of September 11 attack, and 80 folks went up there. Washington, D.C., man, they did phenomenal work. Obviously, did great work for our nation. Helped build a reputation Tennessee Task Force 1 has in the FEMA USAR system without question.
Let me move forward a little bit. You became a lieutenant, and eventually you move on to be a battalion chief, division chief. But in that lieutenant time, we were talking earlier, I thought was key that you got a perspective on the story about the dollar store. 2 firefighters were lost in Memphis in that particular incident. You were lieutenant. You were on Rescue 1 at the time, so you're in special operations. Tell me a little bit about that incident, because you talked about the role of leadership, and one of your peers, who's now rose to the ranks of being the chief, the director of the fire department in Memphis, Gina Sweat. Tell me about that incident. And you had a classmate that died, and how it really affected you. What happened?
And this kind of goes back to 1992. If you look at the difference between how the incident was run at Pilgrim's Hope Fire, there's the misfunctioning at best ICS system, who's in charge, how things are ran, to the Family Dollar Store fire where ICS is in place. You have supervisors and bosses, and I know who I'm working for at the time. Much different incident than just previous in 1992. But some things are very common. As we reported to the command post, Battalion 2, he had command. He called us. Rescue 2 had already been on the scene. They had already effected some rescues of missing firefighters off Truck 11 and Engine 26. They were in a bad way. They were potentially lost as well when we arrived on the scene. Fred Stewart, which was one of my mentors, he knew my wife, my kids. He looks me in the face and says, "You got to go get them. They just pulled Chuck Zachary. They just pulled Zach out of the building. Trent's still in there. You got to go get them, Bease." And he looks me square in the face, and it's a decision he has to make, but he does not want to. You can see it in his face, but that's our responsibility. And Director Sweat, Gina, she was Battalion 4 at the time. She had Charlie Division. She was in the rear of the building. He said, "Gina's in the back of the building. Go see her." At that moment, Steve Brialt, which is now a lieutenant on Rescue 1, was riding backwards when he took off to run. And I grabbed him by his coat and said, "We don't run, we move fast."
Wonder where you heard that.
And interestingly enough, I think that had an impact on how I responded to things from Gina, what she had told me, the orders she had gave us. So we go to the back of the building, and as I'm going to the back of the building, I see the cracks in the cinder blocks where the mortar was failing and the smoke coming from it. If we would have ran, I might have missed those clues. When we were walking outside the building, Truck 6 was on the roof. They cut a hole the size of a Volkswagen Bug, and fire exploded out of the top of that thing. When we got to the back of the building, face to face with Gina, she tells us, "Hey, look, Truck 6 had just pulled Zach out of the building. They were putting him in the back of the ambulance. We see all that occurring." I talked to the lieutenant on Truck 6, Ricky Lee. I mean, he's smoking. His turnout gear is smoking from the heat that he had, him and Andy Mills, that pulled Zach out of the building. And he gives me a briefing on what he thinks Trent would be. Engine 15 comes around the back of the building. We get a hose line off them, get a backup line for them to have our backup, for us. And Gina and I have our face-to-face. She tells us what she expects from us. And myself, Colin Barres, which is now number 2 on the Memphis Fire Department, Assistant Chief. Steve Brialt, Lieutenant on Rescue 1, and Brandon Allen was my driver at the time, and he's a lieutenant on Truck 8 right now. 3 incredible firefighters. We had trained so many times, hundreds of times, on this evolution that very little had to be said. Tagline goes here. We got a hose line. Brandon and I are going to go straight into the building. We're hoping to hit the wall that separates the warehouse area, the receiving area, and the storefront. And Steve, you and Colin, y'all go towards where we believe the door is with the hose line. And we'll meet at the doorway once we find that doorway. So we crawl into the building, very little visibility, even with a thermal imager. I knew then that we really had no business being there. There was only one reason we were there, and it's because Trent was missing.
And one firefighter who you went to school with, too. He was in your class, right?
Yep.
Somebody you knew.
Yep, Gina and myself and Trent all went to fire class together. We hit the door or hit that wall. We meet just as we had planned at the doorway going into the storefront, and it was blocked by pallets or something like that, and we're having a hard time getting over into the storefront area. And I had just stepped over into the storefront, just literally crawled over the debris pile into the store area when Gina calls on the radio out of the building. And then she's in the doorway screaming at me, come out of the building. And I can't tell you how many times in the years that Gina was Battalion 4 and I was on Rescue 1 that we may have had discussions in the front yard over whether or not we should be pulled out of the building, whether I can go put the fire out. It was always, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And sometimes she would give us the leeway and things would go well. But when she said that, there was no question. The tone of her voice, number one, I knew there would be no discussion. But I also recognize that probably in the back of my mind, all the things that I recognize from the cinder blocks in the wall on the side, on the Charlie division, Delta division, something just tells me we got to go. So I round up my chickens and we're trying to get out of the building and push everybody out of the building. You hear in the radio transmissions on the recording, Rescue 1's out of the building. 19 seconds later, it collapsed right where we were at, literally.
I'm sure you relived that after that happened, and then when you got out. Tell me more about that.
And most likely, we would have all made it to the storefront by that time. We would all crawl over that debris, and we'd all been over there. We were within 6 to 8 feet of where Trent was when we found him.
But you couldn't see. You were talking about looking at thermal imager. You couldn't see. Right?
Zero visibility.
Couldn't see a thing.
Zero visibility and extremely hot. We would have had to cross 200-foot storefront with zero visibility, without a hose line, without a tag line. We'd probably died. I mean, there's 4 of us. The 4 guys on Rescue 2 were very close to being killed at the same incident. And then you had a couple, 2 or 3 other people from Truck 11 and Engine 26. I mean, we could have easily buried 10 or 12 people that day. Very easily.
That's leadership and command, because Gina knew Trent Kirk, who was in there.
Correct.
You knew Trent Kirk, and many others did, but there was something special there about that.
I don't know if Gina had shared this in your discussions with her on this, but she had just read the book about Worcester 6 firefighters that were killed in Worcester, Massachusetts. They were sending people up, and their fire chief stood in the doorway. They were trying to send more people. They had 2 lost. They sent 2 more. They get lost, and 2 more, and those get lost. And they're fixing to stick some more in the building. The fire chief stood in the doorway and would not allow them to send any more people in that building. Tough decision. Absolutely. I mean, they're talking to the people on the radio. They're not just missing. They're speaking to them. And he said, we're not sending anybody else into the building. And she had just, if I recall correctly, she told me that she had just read that book 2 or 3 weeks prior to that incident. So she had to make an extremely difficult decision. And in our conversation later, she recognized that we had just stuck Zach in the back of an ambulance and transported him away. Her thinking is if he's deceased, what's the likelihood of Trent being alive? And are we going to risk 4 more people for that? And that's her decision. And she saved our life without question. That moment of leadership from her saved our life. Colin will tell you that. Steve Brialt, Brandon, we're all here today because she had the guts to say no more. And it wasn't an easy decision for me, because when we got to the back of the building, I had to make a decision whether we were going to take the order or not. And, I know all these people personally, and I know their families, I know their kids, and I felt we had to make one effort at it. I didn't feel like there was much of a choice.
You get in there, you actually see the conditions and how bad it is. Not only what you saw outside too, right?
Yeah. No sense of bravado to this. It was just we had to make the decision within seconds whether or not we were going to take that order or not. I think if I would have told Gina, "No, this is stupid, we can't make this rescue," she would have probably said, okay. And many months and maybe even years later, talking to each one of those firefighters individually, I said, what were you thinking? Each one of them separately said, I thought we were all going to get killed.
Right decision, tough decision, right moment. That's leadership. Really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know that was a marker.
Yeah.
Huge marker in your life. Become battalion chief, then you become a division chief, involved chief of training. I know that had a huge effect on your mind and your heart and the job.
Yeah.
Let me move forward, because I know that one was a big deal. I think that says so much about leadership in the fire service, and it moved you on. I know that changed you.
It changed me as in all kinds of levels, obviously. Personally, husband, father, all of that. Definitely had an impact on my decision for the remaining time that I was a lieutenant. Obviously, as a battalion chief, now I'm responsible not just for these 3 other people that are riding with me. I'm responsible for an entire incident. As a division chief of training, which is probably my sweet spot. Most of what we did in those 4.5 years revolved around tactical objectives, incident command. Tried to get back to directing the department to bread and butter operations, hose line advancement, ventilation, search techniques. We'd probably gone 15 years without having a hands-on training evolution that was directed by the training staff. We were doing 40 hours of educational in-service training. I couldn't recall any class that was hands-on. And so that was, we're going to do no less than 18 hours of hands-on training every single year when I became the chief of training. Some people in the academia would call it disequilibrium. You're going to upset some people occasionally, and you're going to make them very uncomfortable. And there's a point that you push them to the point that they're about to boil like a pot of water, and then you have to back it down just a little bit and keep it at a simmer and not let it get too cold. But we had the resources, we had the tool, we had the training facilities. We had to change the mentality of the training staff, and that was the bigger part of it. But once they got rolling, We did a lot of hands-on training. It's difficult for a 1,600-person department. It takes 55 days to complete one round of training for that department.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. The logistics of it is tremendous. But since that time, those two incidents, when you look back on it, it's what drives me as the training chief and what drives me today as the chief of the fire department. When I first met the people that I'm responsible to take care of, I said, there's two things that we're going to do. One is train, and two is pre-fire plans. There's no reason that those firefighters were inside a building at Pilgrim of Hope Church, not on a Sunday, fire in the attic, lightweight truss construction, and you're committing resources to that people, and it makes very little sense to me in hindsight. Family Dollar Store fire, very similar. I think there were some failures in training that let us down, and pre-fire plans. Part of the code in the city of Memphis is each building now has a triangle showing truss floor, truss roof for any new building, and I believe that they had gone back and mandated they put it on every single building following the Pilgrim's Hope fire.
They did.
Pre-fire plans, knowing your territory, knowing your buildings, knowing the threats that you have against you, and your training prevent and reduce the opportunities for firefighters to be injured or killed. And those things are what goes through my mind on a daily basis as the fire chief of the Laverne Fire Rescue, without question.
I do want to mention that you also have experience where as an instructor at National Fire Academy.
Yeah. To me, that's a kind of a culmination of career. I mean, the first time I went to the National Fire Academy was 1999.
Wow.
I think that I counted, I've been there 19 times now as a student or as an instructor. Teaching the managing officer program, which is for that company officer, the most critical role in the fire department. And it's a safety class. The class is applied leadership and a culture of safety. What it is you're teaching young leaders how to roll out change management, change the culture of your department, either a technical challenge or adaptive challenge, through a safety mechanism. They call it a safety class, but what it reality is it's a leadership change management class. They just use safety as the mechanism to make it happen. Having an impact on people at that level, that most important level to me is tremendous, and it's quite an honor for sure.
Now, you retired from Memphis, division chief, chief of training.
Oh, 100%.
Next thing I know, I hear you moved over to Middle Tennessee, not too far from Nashville, Murfreesboro area. Here you are, Laverne Fire Department.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that, how you got there, and we'll talk about kind of your philosophy as a chief of that department. So it's like career number 2, second tour of duty. What is that like? Going from a huge metropolitan fire department to here you are in a different, it's not a small community, but it's smaller. Tell me about it.
Significantly smaller. Laverne is a city that is between Nashville and Murfreesboro, town of Smyrna, then Murfreesboro. It's the county line is Davidson County and Rutherford County is our city limit. There's roughly 43,000 people that live here. It's a shipping and warehousing industry. Logistics industry is a driving force in the city. It is a very diverse town. But some of the most wonderful people I've ever encountered. Like I told you earlier, I mean, it's not uncommon for me to be sitting in Dunkin' Donuts trying to buy some coffee and somebody from the city trying to pay for my coffee.
That's nice.
Wonderful people. It's a great place to work. I assume this role as the third fire chief of this department as a paid department or as a public department. This department started roughly in 1965, if I can recall correctly, as a private company owned by 2 individuals. And it ran that way until 2014.
Wow.
Yeah, the city purchased the fire department lock, stock, and barrel 2014, and I think January of 2015, they became a municipal fire department. So it's a very young fire department as far as the government agency, because it was ran much different if it's a business. I mean, money drove the force. I mean, budgets are always budgets, but this is about profit at the time. So the less personnel, buy a used fire truck, it's a much different environment. The first fire chief died unexpectedly. Chris Clark was the second fire chief. He's now the EMA director in Rutherford County. Those two did a remarkable job getting this city department up and running, getting the right equipment, pointing us in the right direction. And I'm just taking the baton from there and trying to continue that growth professionally, and we're growing in size. We're building a new fire station now. We're going to add a truck company to the complement. When I started, we had 48 firefighters. Currently, our staffing level is 62 firefighters. Get this station built, we'll be pushing towards 70. So we're growing both professionally and in numbers and services. It's a new department.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned to me when you got the job, talked about, I guess the question was what you thought your role was, and you said the word liaison between the fire department, kind of rank and file, and City Hall.
Yeah.
Tell me about being a liaison and why you see it that way.
It's just like every leadership position. Everybody's got a boss at some point. So I have people that I'm responsible for at work. And then I'm ultimately responsible to the city administrator and the board of mayor and aldermen. And so, I have this delicate dance of trying to make sure that we're equipping the firefighters to the right level and standing in the gap and make sure they have everything they need, but within the budget constraints. There's only so much money allowable. Us and parks and police department and the library, roads, public works, they all have to have the same things that we have to have. And so building a partnership with that group of leaders from the different departments or divisions of the city, building relationships with the board of mayor and aldermen, the people that approve the things that we're asking for or whatever it is. It's a growing piece for me, without question. I think anybody that becomes the chief of department, you have to overcome those hurdles of learning. And I definitely felt like all leaders probably are on somewhat of an island, if you will, even if they're in their home department. Here I come into this department, and I lived my first year by myself because my youngest son, Jacob, was a senior in high school, going into senior year, and he'd been in the same little private school since he was in kindergarten, and I wasn't going to pull him out his last year. So I lived in an apartment by myself. So I leave all my friends, my allies, if you will, and my wife in 2.5 hours to the west, and I sit in an apartment and watch YouTube videos every evening. There's definitely a sense of an island, and I think every leader experiences that. They will be on an island. You have to recognize that there are allies and you have confidants, and those are two different things. Allies are the people that are on your team and going in the same direction, but they also may have their own personal agenda. Not saying that they're trying to undermine you, it's just they have their agenda. And then you have confidants that are definitely the people that you trust with your innermost secrets and thoughts, and people that you can bounce ideas off of. One of my greatest confidants is chief officer in South Marin County, California. Somebody I went to the executive fire officer program with, another lady that was deputy chief in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Both of them in leadership positions, both of them understanding what I'm going through as a new fire chief, and definitely have my back without any cost to them. They're just giving free advice. It's definitely a challenge and definitely a change for me, trying to work through the processes of helping a fire department grow. I mean, when you're growing a fire department, we're still babies in the big scheme of fire service.
Are you fire and EMS? Do you do both, or?
We do not have ambulances. We run medical calls, but no ambulances. I think we had 3,500 plus calls last year out of 3 fire stations. Fairly busy department for a department this size, but the work that these guys do is remarkable. I mean, we just finished our ISO evaluation. We received our letter, and we have improved from a ISO 3 to an ISO 2. And, everybody that understands what ISO is, they get it. For the people that don't, basically what this third-party evaluator does is look at certain benchmarks of your fire department, your water supply, your dispatch office, your community risk reduction. Those things that you're doing well or maybe not doing at all, how does that correlate into property protection, the loss? How are you preventing property loss and life loss? This ISO 2 that we got is a direct correlation and is a direct reflection of this department. Most of our fires are contained to room and contents. 90+% of our calls or fires stay in that room and contents, because if you look at our run data, we meet or exceed the NFPA standards for the first arriving fire company all the way to the last company on the scene. And that's because these people in this department work hard. They take their job seriously. They're professionals. They get on the fire truck in remarkable time out the door. They know their territory, and their seating time beats NFPA 100% of the time.
Talking about insurance and other things, that really makes a big difference. That's a good compliment.
Yep, they're phenomenal. The training hours that they put up, pre-fire plans completing, all that they've done in the last few years, and what we're continuing to grow and working through a strategic plan right now to what we're going to do through the next 5 years. Man, there's a lot to be excited about with these guys. There has been turnover. I mean, I won't hide it. I think every fire chief, every police chief in the nation is experiencing this. And you look at the last 3 years, what has changed with COVID-19, personalities of a different generation of employee. I think social media, the availability for a firefighter to see that I can make $7 a week more somewhere else, I mean, that's instantly available to them. Or I won't even duck the fact that some of the people may have left this department because of me.
The new guys comes in, different standards, different ways. Yeah.
Josh Heupel has taken University of Tennessee football program, and people have left. Look where he's at today. And I have to kind of focus on that, because not to take it personal that people are leaving. They have their views and their desires for what they want in their career, and sometimes they don't match. It's not a negative towards them, and it's not a negative towards us as our leadership team. Some people have left for valid reasons, more money, better benefit package or something like that, or they just want something different. Right now, I think it's probably one of the most difficult times to be the fire chief or police chief in any organization.
With that in mind, what you're talking about, you've gotten a little bit innovative. You have another program with Explorers and giving people a career path. And just recently, I guess you can say a little bit of a success or a graduation of that program. Tell me a little bit about that, because these challenges of retaining people when you got other departments that can pay more money and bigger departments can do that. Big cities have all this money a lot of times and pull people away. You've done this Explorer program there. Explain to me that one. How does that work?
And I did not create this program. This was already in place when I got here. But we did work through the Boy Scouts of America, basically who we operate underneath their bylaws and guidance. More or less targeted at a high school fire science program almost, but there's no school credit for it yet. So we have these young people that meet twice a week that are traditionally been meeting twice a month on Mondays with our guys teaching high school kids. It's more than just bringing them there, teaching them how to tie a tie, do a resume, kind of like a Big Brother program that some Explore programs might be. These kids are actually learning fire skills. They actually compete annually in Gatlinburg at a fire Explorer competition. They have competitions on the Memphis drill and getting turnouts on and getting hose laid, different evolutions. We hadn't been able to do that because of COVID the last couple of years, but that they have previously had it, and I would assume that we will return to that at some point. But this is a unique program. These kids, there's probably roughly 40 of them right now, come and go a little bit at a time. We gain a little, lose a few, up and down. And we've recently partnered with Rutherford County EMS. So we have two sides of this now. We have a fire side that we're teaching people skills to be firefighters if that's what they choose to be. And then we also have an EMS side where Rutherford County EMS is coming to our fire station, our classroom. Every Monday in this city, you have an Explorer program running. And they're learning fire skills or EMS skills. And these people may not, in the EMS side, may never work on an ambulance or work on a fire truck. They may go on to be physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, doctors, nurses, who knows? But we feel like we're giving them a very good look at what those fields entail. I saw an interview with Dr. Lori Moore. She is the United States Fire Administrator, the highest person in the fire service of the United States, which happened to teach the Memphis Fire Department EMT class. She was a paramedic with the City of Memphis Fire Department back in 92 when I came on. I don't know what year she was hired. She probably left in 93, 94. Now attained this level. But she was talking about the same things that we just spoke about, the retention issues, recruitment issues. You have metropolitan departments that would have as many as 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 people apply for a position, and now you're looking at 300. Same thing is going on in our world. This department traditionally had 40, 50, 100 people apply for a position. Now we're looking at 8 or 10 that we test at a time. In the volunteer world, where you live, is seeing a reduction in volunteer rates. Used to, those guys, you give them a belt buckle and a patch and a T-shirt, man, they were happy. Now they're, and we're going to have chili once a month.
Yeah.
And they do great work. I'm not making, my son still volunteers in his community, my oldest one. He still volunteers in his community. It is a vital resource to them.
Yeah.
The rates of people entering this occupation are going down. And so one of the things she talked about is an apprenticeship program. If you look in California and Florida, they have fire colleges. And it's part of a college program. And you learn those skills, and then those fire departments in the region come in and scoop you up and put you to work. But it's to the point now that we're going to have to grow our own. It's going to have to be organic. We can't depend on a fire college to do that. So it may be to the point that fire departments are going to have to partner with the school systems. Laverne High School is right now investigating opportunities to have an actual fire science program in their career technology. Potentially could be a partnership with us. And we grow our own. And just this past October, we just graduated 2 firefighters that came from our Explorer program. Those positions were held out specifically for an Explorer.
That's tremendous, yeah.
The job posting was specific to them. And, they come in not looking for something larger, not looking for a stepping stone to another department, that they were grown organically through our system. They see the way that we do business. They trust the people that have taught them and that they're working with every single day. And we could not be any more proud of that program for sure. I think it may be the way of the future for fire departments across the country to do something similar.
That's tremendous. One final question. What is the most satisfying thing about your career, having starting from the ground up, being a second-generation firefighter and 2 sons involved with it? I mean, this has kind of been the family trade, but what is it about this job that, without crying?
A bit emotional. I mean, when you're wound as tight as a 3-day clock, buddy, it's what you get.
Go ahead. You let it go.
And I say this all the time, and have for years. Other than being a relief pitcher, the closer for the New York Yankees, which happens to be the greatest job in all the world. I mean, you're on the greatest stage, playing the greatest sport, wearing pinstripes. It gets no better. That's the best job in the world. But, this probably, for me, this is definitely it. When I got hired, it wasn't about helping people. The cliche, it really wasn't. And sometimes you kind of lose focus of that. But ultimately, that is what we're here for. And some of the greatest experiences I've ever had has been part of that FEMA USAR program. Watching people in Houston, Texas band together to help their own. We're helping them, and man, you could not imagine how appreciative those people were. We've been all over the country, and you feel that. Some of my greatest memories and where I felt the greatest impact I've ever had is through that USAR program. But I think my biggest takeaway from my entire career is leaving a legacy. When I look back at the number of people that I've had the fortune of working with that have gone on to be leaders of their own departments. I mean, John Noble Taylor, I don't know if you remember him. He works in Florida as an assistant chief, and Lynn Thompson, paramedics, 911 director in Maury County. But then you look at Brandon Allen and Steve Briot. They're riding fire trucks and they're making an impact on people. I just feel fortunate that I have the passion for, or whatever gene that is, to teach, to mentor. Even Michael Putt told me that he sees that my biggest asset is that I'm trying each day to push people to be better tomorrow than they were today, to leave a legacy with everybody that I've come in contact with. I think that's what drives me the most.
Chief Ronnie Beasley, my friend, a rookie to leader. Appreciate you taking the time.
Man, Tom, it was a true pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Leaving a legacy from rookie to leader. That's our storyline. And just a note, the Tennessee Municipal League, TML, presented the City of Laverne with an award for excellence in fire services in 2023. To put that in perspective, the Laverne Fire Department is now ranked in the top 5% of Tennessee fire departments and the top 6 of fire departments nationally, under the leadership of Chief Beasley. If you would like to contact Emergency FD Storyline with comments or suggest a story or subject for an upcoming podcast, you can email us at storyline@emergencyfd.com. That's storyline@emergencyfd.com. Also, check our website at emergencyfd.com. That's emergencyfd.com, and you can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and even YouTube. Look for Emergency FD or Emergency FD Storyline. I'm Tom Mann, and I want to thank you for listening. There are many stories coming on Emergency FD Storyline. Join us.